This is a Biota recording, February 11th.
The day of the day of the resignation of Hosni Mubarak of Egypt.
So, welcome to a Biota podcast that's been a long time coming, in terms of actually being on location of the area that I'm referring to as Shea Damer, because it's a collection of a variety of buildings and other wandering places. But no, it's a real luxury to be here, Bruce.
Thank you
for...
a pleasure to finally host you and your brother here.
Yes, the drive up, in fact, before we even reached the airport, my brother was asking about how long we'd known each other, and the kind of time that I was in the Bay Area and all this kind of stuff, and the history of Biota and all these things. And yes, it is, I guess it's been maybe 12, maybe even 13 years of kind of communication, probably more than that now, actually, if I come to think of it. And yeah, seeing the photos online just doesn't do the place justice compared to actually wandering around it.
Thank you.
So no, it's a luxury to be here, and thank you for inviting us both. So it's been a while since the last Biota podcast recording, and in large part that's been due to the fact that I've been trying to get this 1993 writing out, which I passed a soon-to-be-released copy to Bruce, and my sense is that project, aside from actually now getting it out and having it all happen, is pretty well concluded, which means I can return to the Biota transcripts project, which I think that I have 5 so far. There's going to be a whole tome of that devoted to the Evo grid, and you're just, I guess, in the final throes of getting the PhD ready, Bruce.
I am writing draft 3 of the PhD, and it's coming together very well, and we'll see I'm doing a mock examination in Dublin, Ireland, on Thursday of this coming week. So it's my out-of-town, my tryout on the real Viva, or defense, as they call it here in North America, would be in the summer or so if I can get it done.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Being here, I was searching for a chapter to pass on to Bruce, which also linked to a Jeff Clune chapter, which was one of the Biota recordings that'll be in the first transcripts, because the Jeff Clune was just the energy in particular. I know Jeff's come up here and met with you as well. It was a relatively short Biota live recording, but in terms of sheer text, I think it'll be one of the most voluminous ones, and that will probably head up the first of the Biota transcripts, because I think he just covers so many areas, links it together beautifully. But so this year for Biota is going to be quite interesting. The plan was to do the Biota 5 conference at Iskabibble, but unfortunately the connections with Iskabibble seem to have kind of fallen apart, in large part I think due to the fact that Dick, Joseph and Liz apparently can't get funding to attend it. So I really want to put this out to the community associated with, do we postpone Biota 5 until perhaps next year, or whether we should try to work with the Iskabibble folk to get it in Salt Lake City. But time is pretty well running out with that, and Liz Swan has sent me quite a bit of correspondence associated with what our plans will be, and I said I'd save this chat for the time to really discuss that. So, Bruce, you had some anticipation of actually hosting something Biota related here at some stage. Do you think that's a 2012 kind of...
It probably is. We built this stage that you've seen, the Octo stage up in the Upper Meadow, and the idea was to have an events building there, which would be a fabric building of some kind, and just have a group of no more than 15 people.
Yes.
But intense conversations designed to be recorded for podcasting.
Certainly.
Yeah. And take on this divide between the debate between modeling abstract universes to witness bio-inspired phenomena versus the modeling of chemical universes.
Yes.
And how does it all factor? How do you get origin of life, people who are doing this protocells work, how do you get this enormous gulf of the world that they are in their cognitive space with the world of deep deep artificial life, where they're looking at, as Dick says, the origin of artificial life, or the artificial origin of life.
Certainly. And I think also certainly the stuff that I'm experiencing with Noble Ape currently in terms of the social aspects and the reaching into the social sciences, it's quite ironic actually, because Bob Mottram, having spent 6 months working on Noble Ape, is now using it to actually map real-world political connections. So he's kind of taken the, ask yourself, are you a monkey in a simulation, motto that was used with Noble Ape, and taking it to actually explore a wide variety of quite curious political connections. So I think there are so many angles associated with what's going on currently with artificial life, and particularly also I've had some correspondence in a rather hefty tome from Dave Kerr in Canada. And I think the nature of having 15 folk here talking probably, I don't know whether limiting it to a particular area, even a particular area of fascination, is maybe slightly premature, because I think probably by the time we get to 2012, things may have gone in a wide variety of completely different directions as well. So it's going to be an interesting meeting, and I think certainly the opportunity to, as you say, have people both very much embedded within the community and also very much outside of the community would be really very interesting. And I think also, particularly here with the connections SRI, a wide variety of places in this kind of general vicinity, the potential to do larger and smaller groups coming from that. I mean, if people could only get here for, say, a week, they do two days here, maybe SRI does something and, makes it more publicly accessible and these kind of things. I think there are many possibilities, but certainly this is the vision with regards to Biota 5 that I certainly have as well. So, I think
if we did a public, kind of like we've been talking about with Terence McKenna, Beyond 2012, you do a public venue. You do kind of different kinds of venues. So you do a public venue, which is talks, but the invited public. So you have 200-300 people.
Yeah.
But then you have the conference with individual sort of tracks and presentations. But then if you have these intense salon type events,
yes,
we were talking about the Terence Beyond 2012 being at Esalen.
Yes.
So then you're really limited to 15-20 people.
Yeah.
Or here, there would be the salon kind of.
Certainly. But I think the idea that there are different people that would be interested in different parts of that. I mean, certainly the beauty of SRI as a location is that it has a very heavy kind of research science analytical kind of element to it. So maybe more of the vision stuff could be done here with the smaller group, and then the more scientific presentations. And I think really so what we've done here is basically said Iskabibble can do Iskabibble. We'll aim for 2012 with regards to Biota 5.
We should do an event here.
Yeah.
And then we should do, if we can get SRI, if OSHARE is still there.
I think the thing with SRI that's interesting, and certainly I found that through my Noble Ape experience, and others have done it with this stuff, is that I'm still curious kind of how SRI is basically using the kind of after-hours artificial life component to it. But I do get the sense that the stuff that we're contributing is being utilised. I would like perhaps a bit more disclosure associated with how it was being utilised. But certainly just having it as a space is a luxury. So anyway, I think this is probably something that we're putting out to the community. The Conversations mailing list has gone relatively silent as well, and I think this is somewhat what we predicted with the idea of the artificial life winter in terms of people just going and finding work and things like that and having to look at basic survival. But it was interesting talking to Gerald towards the end of last year, because he's through this kind of reinvention that many folk have had to go through due to the economic conditions. He has created, well, not an artificial life-centric company, but certainly a company that will utilise artificial life in doing quite interesting historical and analytical research associated with well, I guess you'd call them artifacts or various things in Europe. I'm not sure if you heard that podcast.
Didn't hear that.
No, but it's fascinating stuff, and I've been tracking Gerald's movements through Facebook and other related discussions. For folks listening in, the roads getting here, I mean, if you're familiar with kind of mountainous roads, then, they're not particularly hairy, but if you're a city dweller, you might find the roads here a little...
It filters out the riffraff.
Yeah, well, it filtered me out for, I guess, the past 14 years, so having been the riffraff that was filtered out, I do understand. But yeah, so returning to Biota 5, I guess the plan is probably to start getting folk who are interested in participating, and then just working out the locations. Because what would be the ideal time to have it here? Were you still thinking the early summer? Was that?
I think so. I mean, certainly, if you can get an SRI location like May or June, when the rains have stopped. Because here, if you can get rains into May, but then it's beautiful until October, November. Yeah. So it could be then, and if it's, if it's before people take their holidays. So May or June up to a certain point, and then September or October are the prime conference seasons. Or in the middle of summer, but then you may lose some people who've gone off. Certainly.
Well, I think the general feeling associated with the Escabibol event was that we would have been pretty well second-class citizens. I didn't really have a problem with that if we were going to get the people, but losing both Dick and Liz, basically, as two of the...
Hummingbird.
As two of the, primary contributors. I mean, obviously Joseph Seckbach as well has really welcomed the artificial life community into his writings. I was reading Steve Grand's creation this morning, and I don't know, I guess I have the luxury of actually writing with Steve Grand on a regular basis thanks to the Seckbach, Gordon, Swan et al. books.
Seckbach, Gordon armada of books.
So I think there's certainly my conversations with Gerald, I've pointed out that these books are completely open. I think anyone in the community could write for them and be perfectly accepted. I think the quality, mainly the diversity of writing, but also the quality of writing indicates that some of these people are chosen through the nature of the work. But I certainly think there are a lot more folk in the artificial life community who could contribute to these tomes and only add to their girth. I think the plan to have something next year in this part of the world with multiple locations is probably the right way to go. So we're really, I guess, sending the message out now that that's the plan.
Yeah, I think I've been to several events at SRI, and they're really, it's a beautiful spot. It's ample parking and
certainly
good organization. I mean, the staff are. If you can get it to be an inside SRI event, and their international conference center is very nice.
Yes, yeah.
If we can do it.
Well, I think there are also other locations that may be available to us as well, and I think certainly this is part of the kind of announcing it more than a year in advance to really get a chance for the kind of planning that wasn't in the Escabibol thing to come together. And I think perhaps even doing it trackless for a good portion of it, or maybe one track, might be the way to go as well. The feedback that we were getting with the possibility of Escabibol doing, 5-6 tracks, of which we would be scattered throughout, I think underwhelmed a lot of folk, particularly because they wanted to have the kind of smorgasbord selection that I guess has traditionally been the Biota conferences. So.
Yeah.
So, Bruce, you were going to Dublin. You, I guess, are periodically going to Dublin now, associated with the PhD. Mm-hmm. But have you thought about what happens after the PhD?
Well, interestingly enough, I mentioned this to Dick, and I've mentioned it to Joseph Seckbach, that perhaps out of this dissertation could come a book project.
Yes.
An invited book project on the boundaries between, basically trying to launch the field computing life's origins, i.e. the chemically inspired de novo ab initio simulation movement in chemistry, versus the working together hand in hand with the chemical protocell origin of life. And this, of course, has been spelled out by Biota and all.
Certainly,
the open questions of artificial life, but it's all spelled out there. But really fleshing it out and creating a volume that would be the foundation stones. Because the fourth chapter of the thesis is the roadmap. It's, if you're going to do this kind of work, what do you need to do? You need simulation on an industrial scale.
Yes.
Like the protein folding at home.
Certainly, yes.
You need different kinds of chemistry that have been done, industrial scale chemistry.
Yes.
That is automated, that uses search, that kind of thing. And then all of the societal concerns about artificial origins of life.
Certainly.
Which can be duplicated in chemical systems.
Yeah.
No, this is your primordial gray goo fear.
Certainly. But returning to, I guess, my favourite part of the Evo Grid collection of movies, the notion of actually printing from digital to organic. That is always, because that also addresses the issue associated with the software interface, which I think is something that Mark Biota kind of progressively pushed for soft artificial life to start considering, that there will eventually be a software interface into the real world. And I think that's an interesting, both philosophical and also computational idea. I remember when we were showing my brother the EvoGrid videos last night, my sense was that Flint was heading up some of that work in terms of the computer interface to that. Where do you see that idea of actually printing into the real world coming from now? And do you think it's going to be more a kind of industrial end, or is it still part of research science?
I think that one of the, and this is a good topic for this potential book, is printing is a mechanism by which you are with high probability placing stuff.
Certainly.
Placing toner and whatnot.
Yeah.
That is anathema to the way that biology works.
Certainly.
Unless you've got massive machinery.
Yes.
Like proteins, enzymes, etc. So, biology is a stochastic kind of a game. And it's very much like the critique of the nanotechnology of Ralph Merkel and company.
Certainly. So maybe it's a bad metaphor. Maybe printing is a bad metaphor.
Printing is actually a bad metaphor.
So the correct metaphor is...
It's almost... The correct metaphor is mixtures. But the mixtures are directed. And the mixtures direct themselves. So, for example, very much like how the EvoGrid software platform works, you start 100,000 blends of things. And then you're doing the enrichment sampling, as Dick Gordon calls it, and then you're taking the rich blend that you like and combining it with another blend in order to get a combined effect. So you're trying to create an autocatalytic cycle.
So really, the simulated history of that, the history of actually those combinations, is what will go into the chemical process that will produce the output. Yeah, and then there's a ratcheting that goes on. So now you've suddenly got yourself So the idea of the cameo simulation, which was the A-Life 12 paper, was you came up with 3 or 4 simulated soups that one of them generated something interesting like the formation of membranes. The other one, and this is way in the future, the formation of a replicating molecule, or the formation of a metabolic cycle. And you take those simulators and you cram them into a very big simulation engine and you put them together. You put the contents and the initial conditions and you try to make them run as a single unit. And that would be what you'd also do in the chemistry. So you'd and this is what these people are doing. I mean, they're trying to get a vesicle or a vesicle to form, and then they're getting RNA or something to form and try to see if it gets infused into the vesicle or into the membranous structure by wet drying or something like that. This is exactly how chemistry works anyway.
But if you automate the simulator, you can automate the chemistry like PCR does for reading genomes. So then you, I think, have a chance at getting somewhere. So it's the combined automation. Then, of course, you find that your combined chemical experiment has gone completely another direction. So you have to go back and recalibrate your simulator. Because your simulator is way out ahead. Your simulator is trying to be predictive. It's trying to say, now if you put this admixture in here, it should go this way. And, of course, it possibly won't. So then you're changing your models and simulate again, and it's an iterative process. But a huge amount of automation would be needed. Otherwise, it's just in 100 years, we won't have gotten very far.
That's very interesting. So in fact, the process that is being thought about in simulation will also be the process that is mechanized, and I guess the beauty of doing it in a simulation space is also that simplifications and improvements that you find in the simulation space will then directly map onto the mechanical space as well.
And it's a huge potential cost savings. So an example is the work we did for NASA. The idea is that you drive a simulated rover down a simulated slope, 1,000 times, and change the dynamics of the wheels and the mass of the vehicle, whatever. And you do all of that, and then by the time you're bending metal, that's what they call it, you're building a test article to put in a sandbox on Earth to test a new concept. That's 2 orders of magnitude more costly to bend metal. So you're bending the metal in the right ways, you're going to get a better test article. So you save all this trial and error in atoms. It's the same thing with this going to the chemical Evo grid, because you'll opt out of experiments that you aren't really going to produce. So the Evo grid, we showed you the statistics last night when we had one where there was just over 200 selected frames that had produced the results we wanted, and 14,000 abandoned frames. That's a big computational cost savings.
Certainly.
Yeah. So think of those as vials of chemicals that you didn't have to fill up and clean and process. And
returning to the Mars rover metaphor, because it is a very good description, the thing with the Mars rover is now the kind of things that they're finding, having cleared up, as you say, the many, many test cases, are actually really fascinating problems in and of themselves. And when you get rid of the general space of problem and get down to the fine granularity of actually, I think, the safety nature of it, I guess dealing with the big problems, the hard, expensive problems in simulation space, so you can deal with the fun problems on location, I think is a very good metaphor. So what you're describing kind of post-PhD is assembling a group of folk together for a book, but there's also the potential, and this has really gone through the whole kind of summoning the Evo grid narrative that's come through the Biota discussions in particular. There's also the potential for actually creating either a formal or informal organisation that is, I guess, basically tasked to... I don't know. You continue this vision, Bruce. You continue this vision.
Well, the idea, and I seem to chronically do this over the years, is in the mid-'90s I created the Contact Consortium and the Avatars conferences, and that led to the creation of formal and informal groups in virtual worlds, much sooner perhaps, or different people met. So there was the vLearn initiative, and many, many other initiatives came out. So it helped to actually launch a field, which was the field of multi-user social creative virtual worlds, and I published a book called Avatars in 97.
Yes.
And so that would be kind of the similar thing for this, which would be cool, or computational origins of life, or computing life's origins, something like that. Launching a book which helps to launch a seminar to bring the disparate parties. In my travels of the world in the last couple of years, I've started to collect the people, and I'm realizing it's the same thing as with Avatars in 1995-96.
Yeah.
There are all these groups that are doing the same thing, but they don't have a venue for what they do.
Yeah.
They don't have a a platform. They're doing, like, there's a group in Leeds that is doing excellent work on like theoretical and then building systems where computing through multiple levels, multiple hierarchies of complexity. You know, they're really doing the hard thinking. But there's
Leeds,
no.
If we pause with just Leeds, because I was interviewed on BBC Radio 4 in, I don't know, maybe 2003, and there was a fellow from Leeds on that interview, and Leeds has been really the quiet achiever in a lot of this kind of research. They started, I understand, with forestry models, and then got down into the biology of the forestry models, and then moved in a different direction. And it is a group that has really, as you're noting, kind of come to this through a variety of very interesting simulation paradigms, which has kind of left them with a good scientist's toolkit worth of ideas.
It's a Susan Stepney's group.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think what you're describing here is really finding the others in terms of creating something where you can actually collect these particular pieces to the puzzle and put it all together. I think the interesting thing associated with the eBird Grid specifically is that it is very much a mix of industry, academia, and potentially even hobbyists. And in terms of that kind of mix, finding the others tends to favour one of these three groups and negates other groups. And certainly when I've talked recently about the Biota community, the group that we really found was the obsessive hobbyists that tend to sometimes be academic, sometimes be in industry, but we have kind of missed other areas. How do you see, in terms of the summoning component, to bring this group together to have the right mix of all these components?
And that is a challenge, because if you have a Springer book, it's going to be academics mostly that are writing for it, because they're just used to cranking the stuff out.
Yeah.
And so I think that perhaps in the book it would make great sense. I mean, someone like Jeff Clune could certainly write a chapter on that.
Certainly.
But to also write a survey chapter of what's being done in the hobbyist community. So if the hobbyists are not really into writing a full-on academic chapter, you interview them.
Yes.
You know, maybe you could even take that
on.
The
surveying is an interesting... I mean, certainly, and really this has been a project for the past 3-4 years, even through Biota, is to try to prompt the hobbyist community to get more in tune with what an academic chapter is, not as something to fear, but as something which is actually quite scalable in a 3-4 month period of time. And what I found particularly, I wrote in a book called Nature Inspired Informatics. It started with 99 academics and me, then it was 50 academics and me, then it was 12 academics and me, and then it was 8 academics and me. And what I realised through that was all this stigma, which I think the hobbyist community has, associated with those academics that'll never be interested in the stuff that we're doing, is completely wrong. So I think in the process of doing a surveying, and I'd be more than happy to do a surveying, although increasingly I feel my knowledge of the artificial life community could be greatly improved by more people kind of getting in contact. Unfortunately, the problem with Biota was we got a kind of 2 generations worth of hobbyists involved, and then it's our responsibility to go and kind of find the others bring them in. So I mean, this really goes out to the community as well. Thankfully, there are a number of folks who are actively looking and sending links and this kind of stuff. So I think particularly vehicles like YouTube are actually creating a lot of the connections in the kind of new generation of hobbyist community.
You search YouTube and you'll find someone's put something up.
Yes, it's very curious because and it tends not to be specifically artificial life keyword related. But anyway, returning to your original point, so I think what I'd like to do through the surveying is also try to encourage folks that were in the hobbyist community to also start embracing, because I think certainly with academic publication, I was looking at the most recent Artificial Life Journal, which I think is the thinnest I've ever seen it. In part, the winter problem is actually affecting the academic community as much as it's affecting every other community. And I think in terms of funding, in terms of a lot of these kind of visionary groups, they are shriveling or moving in different directions, and that is in large part due to the funding sources that are drying up as much in academia as they are in industry currently. So I guess my view is that this is the ideal time for the hobbyists that are winterized, so to speak,
Right.
they're kind of in their bunkers, running their
Hibernating.
simulations, doing whatever they're doing, to actually start considering writing as being not just a luxury, but really a central part to what they are doing in terms of actually communicate. Because there's an element in the hobbyist community that's always said that the academic community has done its own thing, and certainly the academic community's kind of pushed back against that as well. But I think increasingly the stuff that is coming out of hobbyist development, particularly, even the early hobbyist work that's never been properly documented and put out into the academic community, I think, the time has really come for these things to actually be righted. And I think the nature of particularly the current flurry of Springer publications associated with the origin of ... really lends itself to a wide variety of artificial life hobbyists, be it from structure to community to resource use. I'm sure that there's going to be some ecology-centric origin of somewhere through there that I think a number of the artificial life simulators and structure and movement and these kind of things. I don't know how granular the origin of series will get. My anticipation through communicating with Dick was that there were going to be 7, and I think there are now maybe 10 titles. But even through that, I think there's a great deal of potential for pretty well every artificial life simulation that has ever been created to have some contribution to that. But no, I agree. I think there's a need, and this is something that a conversation that I have periodically with Steve Grant, who does occasionally write histories of the artificial life community. However, as is the problem, and you find this too, Bruce, when you talk about the artificial life community, the tendency to stop in the mid-90s, particularly because of the quality of writing and documentation that was coming through that period, and also the folks that were involved, is really quite great. I've had recent correspondence actually with Jeff Clune. I think he posted to the Biota mailing list associated with this too, about teaching or explaining the amazing and kind of continuing vends of artificial life and game development, and the difficulties associating with just... So I guess there is still really a need for probably a Gordon Seckbach et al. Size volume associated with the history of artificial life too. And I think that's something that Steve Grant and I periodically ping each other about, and I hear from other folk as well. I think Wikipedia, there was hope there, but that's pretty well dropped off. And the diversity and the chronology of things, particularly because the things that are associated with people's recollections, it's kind of difficult to, we're getting to a kind of 20, 25, 30-year period of time. And the thing that I found fascinating, I had this conversation with Steve Grant frequently, is the idea that the accounts that he gave through the 90s actually change over time. So even in a small period of time, people's recollections change. So, I think the ability to get a surveying of the artificial life community, even a small surveying, for example, a lot of the stuff associated with when the Evo Grid critters, for want of a better term, have actually been printed and they colonise the asteroid and they interact. That's Jeffrey Ventrella's work now, very much associated with strange computationally generated creatures that are now populating spheres. So I think just through the community, there are a number of components that lend into some part of the Evo Grid description. And I think also, I hadn't seen the full clip, I can't remember. We did a Biota Live associated with Bankers Beware, which related to the amazing, it was a Masters in Architecture student. What was the fellow's name?
Rami L.
Associated with the Evo Grid critters eating London and then basically transforming it into a kind of post-apocalyptic steelscape or what have you. And so I think the artificial life art community is also a part of the community that and sadly, we've had the Vita folk on periodically to remind us that there are tens, if not hundreds, of artificial life artists out there, large part in the Spanish-speaking part of the world, which is kind of curious that we think of, I'm just here at Bruce's kind of going through various art books last night, Stephen Brooke and various other names from the artificial life art community, but my sense is that we are, and probably the way to fix this is actually because Vita produces bound copies for each prize. I think they must be up to about 13 or 14 now. So I think the trick is probably to fork out the probably thousands of dollars required to actually get these bound copies in a full collection and go through it. Because the surveying of the artificial life art community really hasn't been good on my watch with Biota, and I think it's a difficult thing to survey anyway. I mean, that's why it's a luxury having people like Nell and Sally Jane as contributors to Biota, because they are at least surveying it in a kind of hierarchical sense. So yes, there are so many components to this thing, Bruce, going into the future.
Mm-hmm. There really are. Yeah.
So do you still hold the vision that there will be an EvoGrid Institute at some stage, a small self-funding group that will...
it would be a wonderful thing. And Dave Deemer, who has become a very important mentor for this effort at UC Santa Cruz, is involved on the boards or advising several new ventures in origin of life studies. And one of them is a fellow who may be starting to issue small grants and has encouraged me to apply for it. I mean, if the one method of keeping this thing going is just grant for grant, like I've done 10 years with NASA. And you can keep a small team going virtual.
So there's an interesting other angle here. While we're traveling through the Bay Area, we're staying with a fellow in Santa Clara who runs, relatively big money contests, millions of dollars for particular discoveries. And I think this was certainly Justin Lyon's kind of contribution to the Biota discussion midway through. And we've had various other discussions associated with contests. Do you think there's a potential for EvoGrid solutions to particular contests being a funding source as well? Because there are these kind of biochemistry contests that are run periodically that there could be EvoGrid solutions for.
Where that comes in is the chemo grid, because truthfully, the commercially viable partner to the EvoGrid is the chemo grid, which is saying if you can build a general purpose simulator to do bond formation and breaking and change the parameters on real molecular dynamics engines, you can do all kinds of useful science. And so the interesting thing is that protein folding at home, which is done out of Stanford at the Panday lab at Stanford, very successful project, uses the same engine we're using, GrowMax, to do the protein folding problem. And of course, we wouldn't use GrowMax in the next iteration probably, but it's a validation for the approach. So they're doing the geometries of existing molecules and showing how those geometries change. We would be doing formation of new compounds. And there's a panoply of commercial applications for this. So there is that side that every time you promote, it's like game development, producing 3D chipsets for the rest of us.
Yes.
Every time you promote the chemo grid and you manage to you could get a fairly large grant for the chemo grid.
Yes.
But then you can spin that off and use it for the EvoGrid vision. So there's where the commercial and the pure research marry.
Yeah, I mean, returning to the topic of sections of the community that Biota has kind of touched on occasionally, but the industrial uses of artificial life, and certainly the experience that we had with the fellow from... my mind's gone completely blank now, but we did have a fellow who contributed, Ed Sufford, from... I can't think of the company, but he has since pulled back, I think in large part because he gave us a number of quite intimate disclosures associated with his work. Indicates that there are probably a few... and I also get this sense from GlaxoSmithKline as well, that these kind of companies are probably doing a lot of the same stuff in parallel, but very much quietly. And I think the thing that interests me about reaching out to those folk, and this is a discussion that I've had with Marc Bateau as well, is how do we actually create an open environment where there are proprietary elements to it as well? And I think that may be some of what you're describing associated with the chemo grid. I mean, if you get into circumstances where you get funding but components have to be under NDA and these kind of things, how do you think that perturbs the EvoGrid?
Well, you use... we did that actually with the NASA work. You use a dual license. So, for example, use LGPL, which would allow commercial realizations of GPL elements. And so what would happen over time is the engine, you might decide that the actual computing engine to do the molecular dynamics or whatever level you're doing is open because you need the inputs of research.
Mm-hmm.
The glue and how it's being done, what the experiments are being done, are closed and proprietary because it's the experiment. The GlaxoSmithKline would, if they're trying to develop a catalyst or they're trying to develop a protein to do something, and they're using, but they need the assembly of the protein. So the experiment is their business, but the engine is still open, and including the glue. I mean, with the EvoGrid in its totally primordial state now, you have one section where you define experiments, and it says if a molecular size is such and such compared to the score of 5 frames back, drop this frame and return to the previous frame. I mean, that's the logic to drive the experiment, and that logic would be owned by the commercial entity.
Yeah, I guess my sense is, particularly with a number of these entities, that they have their own in-house, every element of the EvoGrid they already have in-house, basically, which they've worked on for, generations in terms of maintaining its proprietary structure. And I think philosophically it may be difficult. I mean, particularly, you sign an NDA with GlaxoSmithKline, for example, and you go in and you realise that they have actually taken EvoGrid research, 15 years ahead of what you could have imagined, but it is all proprietary and locked down. Your responsibility there is to give, research mentoring or something like that. That's I think the difficulty in terms of going into the future, because certainly the discussions that we had, even with Ed Sufford, and private discussions that I've had with people that work in these companies, seems to indicate that they have quite advanced methods of doing things, beyond GROMACS, beyond these kind of things. And the interesting part will come, I think, when we start integrating perhaps the visionary component, or really the summoning component, which I think is the independent it's fundamentally open source on some level, but also it's a method. And I think what may be quite curious, and I know that there are folks in industry who listen to these podcasts and are probably tapping away at the EvoGrid within their own environment. I think this is a philosophical thing that it extends beyond the artificial life community. It's part of the kind of open source industry integration. But really, the feedback that I had from Mark Biota in our discussion associated with this was that we need to find a model to start inviting these people into the conversation. Because certainly there are some components where they may be 15 years ahead, but there are other components where they're 15 years behind, and the community aspect may be that part. And the other thing is that there may be an immense lasing if some of these underlying proprietary components were actually exposed, even subtly, even in ideas form. And I think that's another strong draw card that we could put out to folks who may be part of kind of proprietary industrial science.
One indication of this is there's a group in Israel, Doron Lancett's group, and they have a wonderful sort of artificial chemistry simulator. And we met with them, Peter and I met with them in Denmark, and they're basically saying, look, we are ready to scale this up. We would like to put multiple or thousands of copies of this simulator within an environment somehow and be able to run more experiments. And so, of course, there's a lot of code. We're very dependent on GROMACS right now, and we would have to rip out GROMACS and much more generalize the engine. But for them as researchers, they were like, yeah, can we plug our engine in? And so you could take a GlaxoSmithKline engine and say, look, just register the engine, and the system will dump out the state of the objects and their velocity and the energy of the system. And then it's because that's a JSON file that's generic and it's a published standard.
Certainly, yeah.
And so they could put their proprietary engine in, run it, and get the benefit of the grid.
Yeah.
And then to provide that to researchers to use that particular engine if they want it in an open way, but keep control of the engine itself.
Yeah.
So there's where an actual commercial open coupling works pretty well.
Certainly. I also think the many different models, I mean, the GROMACS version that you were using in terms of the very kind of ball and stick basic magnetic force interaction versus quantum mechanics versus subatomic kind of interactions and a variety of
electron orbitals.
Exactly,
yeah.
like a variety of simulation methods that I know exist, and some have been ported into GROMACS. It's just a matter of doing the right configurations. But yeah, I think the ability to get actually quite strange and diverse Evo grids through, and this in itself becomes a very interesting kind of academic testing point, is you run the Evo grid with GROMACS light, you run it with GROMACS quantum mechanics, you run it GROMACS subatomic, you run it with an independent proprietary, and compare results with known starting points. And then you start actually realizing the kind of multiplicity of solutions of the universe that exist currently as well.
We did this earlier in the 2000s with Digital Spaces, our 3D platform for NASA. We plugged in 3 or 4 physics engines into the same scene, and we had towers of blocks, towers of children's blocks, and then they were on shaker tables, so we applied the shake to each of these tables, and so then one physics engine had its name on all the blocks, and we watched how they fell differently. This is at the same time in the same scene, and how they rendered physics. This is not soft bodies like hard body physics, and we said, there's quite a significant difference in the way these blocks are falling, and that sort of embodies.
But the nature of those kind of tests is that you need the blocks will probably capture one ideal one, or maybe 2 out of 5 or what have you. But you need multiple tests for these because they're all optimized for different kinds of things, unfortunately. So, yes, yeah. Well, I think this has really been a kind of a visionary potential for the future on a deck, on a sunny morning kind of discussion.
To all out there, the PhD dissertation will be posted publicly in its final, maybe even in its draft form. Certainly off of damer.com and evogrid.org.
Yes.
And I invite comment, because I need every possible critique before I do the defense.
Yes.
In the summer. So I would probably publish the draft this weekend somewhere, and then the final maybe by April, if I don't get too many other distractions. But so the draft can be commented upon by anyone, and I need critiques of this thing.
Yes, a large part of my sleepless night last night was trying to track down stuff to pass on to Bruce, actually, based on the time frames associated with that. And I think as others read the document, they too will probably find you a Dick Gordon-like set of references that you can add in there, because really capturing the tapestry of this thing. There are just so many sources. In fact, it's the fact that the Biota transcripts associated with the Evo grid isn't currently published may also be a slight detriment, but maybe we could do a rush towards an April deadline so we could actually get that text through.
I can at least put a reference to it.
Yeah, I have a very good fellow who's doing the transcriptions for me, and unfortunately, due to just a backlog of my own stuff, I haven't had a chance to get him some through recently. But what I'll do is, when I head back to Vegas, put through a priority of the transcriptions associated with the Evo grid. I don't know whether you'll be able to review the text thoroughly, but what it will certainly do is produce a sense of what it'll look like when it comes out. Because my plan was originally to do the non-Evo grid related, relatively more kind of contemporary game development-esque visionary philosophical stuff as the first one, and then do the Evo grid one as the second. But if your time priorities are the way that they're described, and I've had similar time priorities, maybe we could switch up that order.
Sure, yeah. That would be good.
Well, Bruce, we're waiting to have breakfast here. My brother is also waiting to have breakfast with us, a little inside the recording session for folks listening in. So I did want to kind of wrap it up now, but it's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you, Bruce, in your own environment. And it's a beautiful environment indeed.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, it's one of the few things where the internet doesn't know justice.
Thanks.
It's sufficiently complicated and sufficiently fractal-like, but you unfortunately have to be here on location to really get a proper understanding of it. So it's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you.
And for folks listening in, I welcome all correspondence. The Biota Live sessions will be restarting, like I said, this book thing has been pretty all-consuming for me, and I think the transcripts will probably take its place in terms of some degree of consumption, but I do want to give real-time updates to the community through the podcast in terms of the transcripts progress, and I think it's going to be a new paradigm. Bruce passed me a few books last night and said, what a pity these books are $150 odd. My vision with regards to the transcripts is that they're going to be under $10 in paper form, and probably half that again in electronic form, because I think we need to get this out to undergraduates, non-undergraduates, everybody in the cheapest possible fashion, as fast as possible, to really get the ideas moving, and doing what we've done in podcast format in a different format, in a couple of different formats for folks who would prefer to consume these things in text form. And I have to say, having read the initial transcripts, you do get a different experience out of actually reading the conversations. So it's a completely different format, and I think folks who have even listened to the podcasts periodically will probably get a lot more out of the written form too. And I also have to thank Bruce and my mutual friend KMO here for really starting this idea in terms of transcripts. He did one associated with his podcast, The Sea Realm, and I think that really started my thinking in terms of this, and I'm anticipating talking to KMO on a couple of occasions in the near future about this very phenomenon, Bruce. So I'll send on your regards. I let him know that I was coming here, and he passed on his regards.
Thank you.
And thanks for folks for listening, and I'm sorry once again for the lack of podcasts recently, but the numbers will resume, folks, so stay tuned. More Biota coming shortly.